And welcome back to another episode of Bushwackers Breakdown, and today we are taking a look at the frog. So, in this episode, it's more JJ heavy, or JJ focused, I should say. JJ meets up with an old friend in Asheville, and they spend the night together. And in the morning, JJ gets a text from the Bushwackers, and he thinks it's an emergency, and he has to flee, and he has to run. But not before his quote-unquote girlfriend makes him promise to contact her. JJ arrives in Charlotte to find Luca and JJ in the middle of playing a board game, and really they just need him to arbitrate. Frustrated, JJ leaves, and a few days later he runs into Clara, who is angry that he didn't get back with her, and in her anger she turns him into a frog. Meanwhile, Lee and Luca are obsessed with their board game, and JJ, as a frog, bursts in and asks the two for their help. They manage to track down Clara and force her to turn JJ back into a man, but the two break up. Luca and Lee go back to arguing over their game, and JJ, heartbroken, walks away. So, in this particular case, this was the first episode where I had an A story and a B story, because most of the episodes before were just A stories, and I think the majority of the episodes I write are mainly A stories, but this was the very first one where there was a secondary episode going on. So the A story first, I remember as a kid reading a lot of stories about witches turning people into frogs, and I thought, that'd be pretty funny if the Bushwhackers had to deal with something like that, so I decided, we'll just go ahead and give this a shot, just to, again, just having fun, just to see what's going on with that. Now, for me, Asheville has always been this weird hippie place, and if you ask anybody from North Carolina, people will tell you Asheville is like San Francisco in the mountains. It's hippie central, and for me, I always thought, being a free-spirited, hippie-loving place, it probably makes sense for them to have, like, New Age witchcraft kind of stuff, because as a kid, I also remember hearing stories about, all these, like, witches and ghosts living up in the mountains where it's, like, all dark and isolated, so for me, it would make sense that the Appalachia would be the home to witchcraft, so I kind of incorporated that element into the story. And JJ does make trips to Asheville to visit his friends, so I figured, I'll try to make it a little more JJ focused, because he's that third guy that nobody really pays attention to. It's like with the Three Stooges. Everybody pays attention to Moe and Curly, but nobody cares about Larry, so I figured, put the spotlight on him a little bit. And this is actually the first episode where something bad actually happens to a bushwhacker. JJ has to undergo a transformation from a man into a frog, and he is at the mercy of his two colleagues, who honestly don't really seem to care about a situation because they're more focused on playing a stupid board game. And for anybody who's grown up in the 1990s, or anybody who was a kid before 2000, board games were the staple of childhood entertainment, and the idea for including that came from an episode of Seinfeld where Kramer and Newman were playing Risk, where they were busy conquering all these different territories to the point where they were just obsessed with it. And I was like, that'd be pretty funny if I incorporated that element into it. So I was just like picking and choosing different pieces from, fairy tales and North Carolina lore and Seinfeld and just melding it into that one episode.
Are you sure you know where the impound yard is?
Oh, stop stalling. Come on.
I can't think. There's all this noise.
Or is it because I've built a stronghold around Greenland? I've driven you out of Western Europe? And I've left you teetering on the brink of complete annihilation.
I'm not beaten yet. I still have armies in the Ukraine.
The Ukraine. You know what the Ukraine is? It's a sitting duck. A road apple, Newman. The Ukraine is weak. It's feeble. I think it's time to put the hurt on the Ukraine.
I come from Ukraine. You not say Ukraine weak?
Yeah, well, we're playing a game here, pal.
Ukraine is came to you? How about I take your little boras?
And plus, I've been reading a book called Europe's Tragedy, The History of the 30 Years' War by Peter Wilson. And I had also started reading The Heart of Europe by the same author about the Holy Roman Empire. So a lot of the elements that I include in there are just me just wanting to input, my historical fascinations with the Holy Roman Empire in general. And that story is just me being a history nerd, for lack of a better word. I kind of feel like most TV shows and comics don't really do that. It's just shallow. So I kind of figured if you can include a little bit of those references in there, that's great. So that's what I did. But when it came to JJ being a frog, I kind of imagined him being in a situation where he was at the mercy of the other two, because the Bushwackers have pretty much relied on him to do everything, because they're both because Lee and Luke are lazy, morons who don't really want to do that much work, because Lee's focused on other things and Luke just doesn't care. So the fact that JJ has to come to them for help and they're dragging their feet is just ridiculous. And oddly enough, it never gets mentioned that much again afterwards. But this would also be the first witch story I wrote for season 1. The other 2 episodes are the Ivy Witch and Emerald Curse. And thinking back on it now, I kind of think I might have made it too witch heavy. But it is what it is, really. I do want to talk about the cover, because this was actually the first episode where I actually gave serious thought about how I wanted to design the cover. And actually, oddly enough, this was the first cover that I designed, because I was really fascinated with psychedelic art from the 1960s, and I was just looking at all these posters and artwork, and I was just like, that really does fit the design. Like, how can I incorporate that? And eventually, eventually I found a design that I liked, but I had to go through several different stages of sketching it out and figure out what color palette. I knew with psychedelics it was all about like these bright colors, like bright greens, bright reds, yellows, bright blues, kind of like just popping out. And when I drew it, I was like, I definitely wanted to make it as trippy as possible, and I think I achieved that. I mean, if you look at all of the other psychedelic posters from that time period, I kind of feel like it's an homage to it. I wouldn't say it fits in with the aesthetic entirely, but it comes pretty close, I think. So, yeah, that's pretty much my breakdown of that episode. If you guys have any further comments or any further questions, just feel free to put them down in the comments below. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Bye.